your book, that's I think the biggest reason we're having this conversation, The Pragmatist Guide to Governance. Marcin picked it up actually immediately after our conversation 2 weeks ago and started listening to it. And we've been chatting about it a little bit. But the reason I bring that up is because maybe that's a good focal point for me to better understand what is your project right now? What connects all this work? And specifically in the realm of governance, what do you want people to take away? Like,
Well, I want to take
what's the
over the world.
message?
That's the goal. Like, unironically, that's the goal that always has been the goal. We live in the early days of human civilization. We haven't even had a single planet ruler yet, much less the ruler of an interplanetary empire, which is the direction we need to go. And when I say I don't mean me as a physical flesh and blood human. I mean the ideology that I share with other people similar to me, which is we need to shed, it's the pragmatist ideology, you could say. We need to shed all of this ideology that blinds us. We need to shed all of these niceties and hopes and that blinds us to efficient operation, because when we can create a system that is more efficient than the surrounding systems, it can begin to eat those systems. I mean, if I just create a family office, one of the things we describe in the book, and you could do this with a DAO as well. And this is why for the family office that we're creating, it makes sense to make it a DAO, because I expect it to last longer than the US governing system. You can create a governing system that intrinsically grows every year, that intrinsically expands every year, and that is resistant to individuals using the fact that it's expanding to try to dismantle it or capture value from it. When you create things like this now, the big problem you get is they reach a certain size, like a Google or something like that, and the bureaucratic weight of the institution lowers the innovation that they are able to have, and so they don't grow more, right? And then the governing structures that they exist under, like the US government, right, has a vested interest in preventing them from increasing in power, so they prevent them from increasing in power. But with a DAO, you could potentially circumvent some of these things and create a perpetually growing institution. But to do that, you need to be sober-minded in how you are seeing the way that an organization interacts with the world around it. And almost systemically as a society today, most people aren't sober-minded. So they aren't sober-minded about things like population, right? Like, well, you can look at how quickly in the US, if our fertility rates continues to decline at the rate it has from 2010 to 2020, for every and we have one generation every 30 years, for every 100 Americans, there's going to be 4.1 great-grandchildren. People do not understand. They're like, oh, well, maybe we can fix this with immigration. And I'm like, even as of 2019, by the UN's own statistics, collectively, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean fell below repopulation rate. We are draining from an evaporating pool. The world is fundamentally changing in so many ways, but people don't want to engage with what that means economically, what that means socially. But when you do engage with those questions, and you do have access to new tools like DAOs and AIs and genetic selection, you can very easily beat the rest of the world, or the world that will be left 100, 200 years from now. And so when I say I want to conquer the world, I don't mean me specifically. I mean, I want a sane ideological faction that looks at the world as it is rather than as they wish it was, and tries to optimize it, utilizing the truth about human nature and the truth about the world. I think that they can capture more and more of the world, especially because our existing institutions, whether at our universities or our media, has increasingly been ideologically captured by a faction that systemically ignores truth in a way that the citizens of most countries, I think, now like generally agree, oh yeah, the media is actually like lying to us like a lot. The academic system is lying to us like a lot. And that's cool, because that creates motivation for many average citizens to begin to look for new ways of operating things, new ideologies. And now is the time. Now is the inflection point of our species. And every human who's alive today is so lucky to be living through this inflection point, because your life can matter in a way that human lives typically don't matter. Throughout most of history, you're not at inflection points. You don't get to decide what happens next. But I think anyone who's sober-minded, we're at an inflection point that is, tantamount to when the Roman Empire transitioned from a republic to an empire. We get to decide, does the democratic empires of the world, do they collapse? Do they transition into an empire? Or does something else happen? Does a dark horse come in and make a gambit to win? And what's really cool is it is very, very realistic that a dark horse could win if they are utilizing, I think, a sober view of reality and cutting edge technologies like DAOs and AIs and genetic engineering.